Hey you guys, it's Peter, and welcome to my channel, Peterisms, where I tell stories of my life and just little things that I have learned as I have grown into the person that I am today. And I am getting ready to go on my Zoom literature meeting here in 32 minutes. So I'm going to do a really short meditation read today, but I wanted to make sure that I came on here and did this because I'm trying to get back in the routine of things, and I also wanted to read a meditation. So I thought this would be the perfect preparation for me going into my literature group tonight. So I brought the two Melody Beatty books. I don't know which one I'm going to read. I feel like I'm leaning more towards this one tonight. So let's see what it says to us for April 12th. Let's see. Okay. Oh, this is a good one. Letting Go of Fear, April 12th. Picture yourself swimming, floating, peacefully down a gentle stream. Okay, before I get into this, I just have to say, I said this in my video the other day, and I'm going to say it again in here. I also said it in my vlog. Melody Beatty has a cassette tape, I think. I don't know where it is now. Or you probably could get it on CD or download it somewhere. I don't know. Of her doing these guided meditations. And there's one where she's talking about floating down the river and that you just like go with the flow of life and things like that. And it's so fantastic. One night when I was vlogging, this was probably 3 or 4 nights ago, I looked it up on YouTube. And if you put in on YouTube, Melody Beatty guided meditations, it actually pulls it up. And it's just exactly this. She talks about picture yourself floating peacefully down a gentle stream. That's exactly what it is. And so if you want to hear it, it's one of like 6, I think there's 3 meditations on each side of the cassette, which on a YouTube video, obviously there's no cassette. But I think it's 6 total meditations or 4 total meditations or something, but they're fantastic. So if you're looking for some guided meditations or you've never done them before, it's really where just somebody reads to you and you kind of like just imagine what they're doing. They're fantastic. They also call them guided imagery as well. It's a fantastic meditation tool. Okay, Letting Go of Fear, April 12th. Picture yourself swimming, floating, peacefully down a gentle stream. All you need to do is breathe, relax, and go with the flow. Suddenly, you become conscious of your situation. Frightened, overwhelmed with what-ifs, your body tenses. You begin to thrash around, frantically looking for something to grab onto. You panic so hard you start to go under. Then you remember you're working too hard at this. You don't need to panic. All you need to do is breathe, relax, and go with the flow. You won't drown. Panic is our great enemy. We don't need to become desperate. If overwhelming problems appear in our life, we need to stop struggling. We can tread water for a bit until our equilibrium returns. Then we can go back to floating peacefully down the gentle stream. It is our stream. It is a safe stream. Our course has been charted. All is well. Today, I will relax, breathe, and go with the flow. Really good meditation. And I think, you know, being in recovery where we talk about that addiction is formed in 100 forms of fear, I think it's hard because not just with people that have, you know, addiction issues, but all people, I think, that we have so much of our lives that are grounded in fear, you know, fear of the future, fear of success, fear of failure. I actually just did a fear inventory with my sponsor, and I literally had like 50 or 60 things on my fear list. Fear of doing inventory was on there, you know? And it was all of these fears of things that I never, like fear of being alone, you know, fear of having too many commitments, fear of all of these different things. And it was this list that I pulled from that my sponsor had given me. And it was fantastic, you know? And so we're going through there and we're looking at like what the commonalities are, you know, of all those situations. And it really kind of helps you see how you look at life, you know, if you have certain fears and if you can find the common theme through them, then you can kind of understand, well, this is how I respond to the world. This is how I live in the world with all of my fears, right? But I think it's really an easier said than done kind of thing to say, let go of fear, you know, just throw caution to the wind, let go of fear, you know, just be spontaneous. I think that would be great, you know, if we could do that. Do I believe that there are people out there that are fearless? Yeah, I think that they're born that way. My dad is somebody that I have very few times in my life noticed any kind of true fear from him. In fact, when we were in high school, my dad and my stepmother and I, or when I was in high school, my dad and my stepmother and I think it was like a junior junior or senior year, we took a trip over Christmas break to England. And when we were flying back really, really late at night. And there had been like threats of like, you know, something was going to happen to one of the planes, and it was a certain airline. I think it was like, well, I don't want to say because that airline or whatever, but that airline had certain threats that the flights going from one airport to another, something was going to happen to one of those flights. Well, there had been like 6 or 8 flights or 5 flights, I don't know, that had gone and nothing had happened to them, and we were the last one. And so at the counter, my dad and my stepmom and I were standing there, and the guy was like, well, if you want us to move you to tomorrow, we can put you up in a hotel room. And my dad's like, no, we need to get back. And we were all just kind of looking at him, and he was like, are you sure? He was like, because, you know, the plane's not, there's nobody flying on the plane, because there's only, I mean, there was literally like 2 people on this like huge plane that they were flying anyway, right? Because nobody wanted to take this flight. And my dad looked at him, and he was like, no, we're not afraid to die. I was like, speak for yourself. I'm like, oh my God, I haven't even lived a life yet, you know? But we made it home, and we were completely fine. And I even remember being on the plane with my dad, because they like put us in like first class because there were no seat, like nobody flying on the flight. So they let us like sit wherever. And I remember we were sitting like at the very front of the plane, which of course that part was fantastic, right? But, and I remember saying to my dad, like, what would happen if something was going to happen to this plane? Like, I said it would just all be like over in a second, and we wouldn't know that. We wouldn't know anything, right? And he goes, well, actually, my dad's a very intellectual science person, you know? And he was like, actually, no. He was like, because of they're usually altitude based, it would start at the end of the back of the plane, and then it would rush forward. So we would actually know everything that happened until the very last moment. And I remember just looking at him, and he was like, Pete, don't worry about it. Nothing's going to happen. And I remember like asking him like, well, what's the altitude? And he goes, well, usually, I mean, he was just talking to me about it as if it was like, well, what's on the menu for dinner, you know? And he was like, well, usually it's this or usually it's that. And so I would be like, well, what altitude are we at now? And he'd be like, you know, and I was like terrified the whole trip, you know? I remember we were coming back, and I think it was like my stepmom's birthday or something, because she was like, my dad was like, nobody dies on their birthday. I was like, Dad, that is not true, you know? And in my stepmom, there was like these people that were sitting like just a couple rows behind us. I mean, that was literally it on the plane. And I remember my stepmom got real upset with my dad, and she turned around and she goes, but what if it's not their birthday? And we were like all like, she and I were totally scared. So it's kind of like this, in retrospect, it's this funny story, you know, that we tell. But my dad is somebody that, like, I mean, I've never noticed him to have a lot of fear in life, you know? He doesn't live his life that way. He lives pretty fearlessly. But the other thing that I think is fantastic about it is, and I wish I could be more like this, and I think that as I've gotten older, I have become more like my dad and more like this, is that in certain given situations where fear is removed, then it allows you to suit up and show up and be who you need to be in that situation, you know? I don't know if my dad is a believer, and, you know, we haven't had talks about this in years, but we used to, you know, about like spiritual destiny and things like that. I mean, I think his attitude is just like, if it's going to happen, it's going to happen, and you really can't control it anyway. Like the fate kind of idea. But I don't know, you know, but I don't know that he would, without that he would live his life any differently anyway. My dad's just not a fearful person, you know, he just isn't. And he is very pragmatic, and about like any situation you go into, you know, what was he just telling me the other day? I was telling a story on here, and then I was talking to him on the phone, and I said, do you remember telling that? My dad always, okay, so he did a lot of high risk things after my parents got divorced. And one of the things that he would do is every year he would go hiking in the Canadian Rockies by himself. And a bear attacked he had his like pack and everything outside the tent one night. And my dad literally had nothing. He was like up in the Canadian Rockies with like it's snowing, it's, you know, horrible conditions, and he has nothing. And this like bear, this 10-foot bear is outside, you know? And I remember and so I'm talking to my dad on the phone about it, and he's like laughing, you know? He's like, this is nothing to him, you know? And there's a lot of situations that my dad has had like that in his life. And he's just a fearless person. I think you're either born that way, or you work towards removing those fears or understanding those fears, you know? And I think for a lot of people, fear is a defense mechanism that exists to help us through situations. So not all fear, I think, is bad. I don't believe that. I think some fear is good. I think some fear is a protection mechanism for other things. I think that's, you know, but I think then the flip side of that is there was my mom, and my mom was you know, if an ant crawled across the floor, she was like on the couch, like, get rid of it, you know? So there was like, and where am I? Well, I'm a perfect mess right in the middle, I guess, you know? Like, there were some things I mean, if a snake was crawling across the floor, I don't think I would like, freak out, but I'm like looking down there like if there wasn't really a snake. I mean, I wouldn't pick it up and play with it. But I grew up like in the woods playing with crawdads and snakes and stuff, so that I know that's hard to believe, but I did. So that kind of stuff doesn't really freak me out. Now, if it was a python, I think that would be a totally different thing. If it was a shark. Okay, this is funny, so I'll finish on this. So, you know, like I've talked about this, my biggest fear in the entire world, okay, is sharks. And I know it's rooted in me seeing the movie Jaws when I was a kid a lot. And my dad used to get me out of the pool, he would go, na 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 na, and I would be out of the pool, because I could swim for hours. I love to swim. I was just thinking that yesterday. I was driving around, and I was like, I want to be in a pool. So we were just in Miami, and you know, I would go out into the water and come back in, go out of the water and come back in, and it's crystal clear. You can see way out. There's a sandbar, you know, way out there, like, you know, probably 500 feet out there or whatever. And so Alex ran in to go to the bathroom into the resort, and I was like, okay, well, I'm going to go into the water real quick. And so I was out there, and, you know, and I'm very careful, honestly, even today. Like, I wouldn't go out to a sandbar by myself, and I'm constantly, like, looking around, like, do I see any dark shapes moving in the water or anything like that, right? But I do get in the water, because I'm not going to miss out on those things in life. I don't like getting into water where I can't see under the bottom. So there were like, probably like, there was like 2 guys and 3 girls that were kind of like to my, well, if I'm looking at, okay, they were this way. And then there were some people over here. Well, this woman comes down, she was like a lifeguard, you know, on the beach on one of those like 4-wheeler things. And she's like, get out of the water, get out of the water. And they're like all looking around like, what? And she starts blowing on her whistle and she's like, shark, get out of the water. Okay, I'm like up to here in water, right? And I'm standing there and I'm looking around and I'm like, there's a shark in the water? I swear it didn't even hit me right away, right? And so they start running in, and she's standing there, and she's blowing on her whistle, and she's like, shark, shark, get out. And I'm like, is this really happening? And she's like, get out of the water. So so I was standing there, and so I slowly started walking in, because I was like, if there's a shark, it's going to come. I know how this story ends. This has been my biggest fear forever, you know? Turned out it was a bull shark, and it was in the area, and they watched that stuff very, very closely. At the same time she was going along, the Coast Guard was going along, and they were looking for it and trying to get everybody in. There was this one guy, and he was like probably 10 or 15 years older than me, and he was swimming laps, like a lap way out, and they couldn't get him in, and he just like finally looked up, and he was like, and they were like, everybody's like, come in. It was kind of a really like scary moment, you know, because I was like, oh my God, is this how it's going to end for me? I get taken down by a bull shark, you know. But what was so funny was in that moment, I wasn't as scared as I thought I would be, you know? So I don't know. Sometimes maybe when you face your fears, they're not as scary, you know? Or maybe I've worked on it a little bit, or it would be a different story if that was a 20-foot great white, though. I'm telling you right now, and I saw it, it was like, ah! People always want to send me those memes and gifts. They think it's funny, but it's not. Anyway, my husband, most of all, he sends them to me. Anyway, I love you guys, and I will see you tomorrow. Bye.